Okay. So like it says in the instructions, if you could keep your audio off during the session, that will help decrease background noise. If you need to make a comment, you can write it in the chat, and I will try to keep an eye on people raising their hand. And welcome to our bike maintenance webinar. So today we'll be going over just basics of how to check your bike before a ride. We'll talk about some flat repair. So if you have a flat tire, how can you fix that? And then we'll go through cleaning the chain and making sure your bike is in working order. So I'm gonna try to full screen here. Okay, so the ABC quick check basically stands for air, brakes, chain, and crank. So if your bike's been sitting a while, it might have some flat tires, one or both, maybe flat. On the side of the tire, there's usually a recommended pressure amount that you should fill to. So some road bike tires are 80 or 90 PSI. Mountain bike tires are different. If you find that you have one or more flats that once you add air are still flat, then you might need to patch it or change the tube entirely, and Scott's going to talk to us about that. So the first thing to check is air. Make sure your tires have enough air in them to ride. The second thing, the B and the ABC, are brakes. So use the brake levers on your handlebars, squeeze them a few times, make sure that they're actually engaging the brake pads around your wheel so that you'll have stopping power on your front and back wheels. You can also check your brake pads or other brake components to make sure they don't look worn down or rusty. Again, if your bike's been sitting a while, you might have other issues with the brakes, but that's a good check to do. And then C stands for chain and cranks. So that's basically the part that you pedal on that turns your back wheel. Give it a whirl, make sure it's turning and not too crickety, it's not loose, there's nothing that is hanging off of it. And you can also look at your chain at this point to see if it's really covered in gunk or if it's really dusty or there's rust on it. All of those things, your bike may be rideable, but it's probably not safe to ride with your chain in that condition. So I've seen some pretty rusty chains, I've seen some pretty gunky chains. Just give it a look and make sure it's nice and clean or that you have lube on it. And Melissa's going to talk to us about how to clean the chain and make sure it's ready to go. So some other things that you can check are the quick releases on your bicycle wheels. So that's what's keeping them attached to the frame. Make sure that all of those are closed in a closed position tightly so that when you start spinning, your wheels won't pull off the frame or stop you in some way. And then just take a test ride, do a check, maybe in your driveway or around the block to make sure that everything's working, your brakes are engaging, your gears are changing if you do ride with gears, and just to make sure that if you are starting to go on a longer ride, you'll be in a safe position to do that. So yeah, does anybody have any questions about the ABC bike check or anything to add? Okay. Cool. Well, we'll move on to Scott's part of the webinar. So he's going to talk to us about changing a flat. And I'm going to mute myself.
Alrighty. So basically we have all our toys for changing a flat. These are things that you should carry with you all the time. You want some kind of flat kit that's the traditional one is going to have, you see there in front of you at the lower, it's got the glue, it's got some sandpaper, and it's got a patch. You want some kind of wrench if you don't have quick releases. And you can take a traditional crescent wrench, or you can take something like this, which is pictured on there, and it fits multi-size nuts. And the big one here at the end is actually designed to fit the nut on most bikes. So it's one of these things where if you really need to be kind of prepared with the kind of tools that you're going to have, you always want a pump of some sort, whether it be a frame pump, whether it be CO2 or a floor pump. Floor pumps are kind of hard to carry with you, so it's some kind of frame pump or CO2. is your best option because you want to put some air in the tube after you've got it back patched and back on. And you've got your tire levers. And these can come in an assortment of sizes and ranges. One of the neat features about these most people don't realize, and I'll try and show you up here close, is it's got a little notch here. We're going to show you what that's for a little bit later because it's a neat little trick that's going to just make your day so much easier. And it's for everybody who doesn't know it, you're going to do this and they're going to go, oh, wow, you know so much. And you're going to look really smart and impressive. So we're going to come back here to the bike. I got to re-aim the camera here just a little bit. So a couple things. Kat, can you show the picture of the quick release? Okay, well, that's the chain. There we go, the quick release. And that's the one on the front. You've got a similar one on the back. One of the main things you want to look for on this is that it's when you got it, it's not aimed forward and it's not real loose, because otherwise the wheel can come off easily. One of the tricks is on the front, you have to actually unloosen, you have to loosen the bolt on the other side of it just a little bit to get it to drop out. But on the back, you don't have to really do that. You just have to release it. You don't have to do any extra loosening. Shift your derailleur there a little bit and comes right out. Now, the trick with that is before you do that, you want to shift into your lowest gear. So Kat, can you show the other picture? Previous picture with the rear cassette. There we go. And if you notice on that picture, the chain is at its lowest, in the lowest, what's called actually the highest gear, but it's the one farthest from the bike. And that way it's so much easier when you go to put it back on, you're not struggling to get it in gear. So we're going to take it that you've got your flat. We've got to the point where you've got the rear tire off. One of the first things you want to do is you want to look at the tire before you actually do anything else to see if you can actually see where the puncture is, to see if it's a thorn, see if it's a slice, see if it's something in the sidewall. Because if it's something in the sidewall, that's going to be a bit more difficult to fix than just a traditional puncture from a thorn or a nail or something. So once you've done that, you realize it's flat. Get your trusty tire levers. Here's that little trick. You want to take that scoop, face it away, and you want to line it up with one of your spokes. Kat, can we show that other picture for the close-up? There you go. See how that little notch that's away from the tire? It's captured one of the spokes. So as I'm holding it here, I don't have to hold this tire lever between the friction of the wheel and the spoke. It's holding itself. So I don't have to hold that. I can then place the other tire lever. That one's just going to hold it, and then you just make a circle all the way around. And you only have to do this on one side. If you do it on both sides, you're going to take the tire off. Once you do that, you can put your tire levers away, and you can just pull your tube right out. Now, if you're lucky, you figured out where that puncture was. And then so that you know basically where it was. So before you take the tube out, you can figure out where that is so you know where you're going to put that patch. Or if you do like some people, they don't even bother with it. They just put in their spare tube. So it depends what you want to do, what your goal is. Some people want to get back on the road really fast. Some people, they want to take their time, make sure it gets done right. So we got our tube out. can leave the tire on the wheel. If you've got a brand new tube that you've just pulled out, you want to put a little bit of air in it, and you can do that easily. If depending on the valve, if you've got a Presta valve, it's real easy. Just make sure it's unscrewed. Give it a little blow, just like a balloon. You put some shape in it, and then what you can do, be careful here, because if there's any kind of glass or anything, any material, it might catch you. But if you just keep it real close to your cheek is sensitive enough, it's going to feel that air coming out. So you want to do that. You go around, find where that hole is. Once you've done that, if you got something to mark it, fine. If not, give it a nice little lick. Yeah, not the cleanest thing, but that way you know where it goes. Then you get into your patch kit. Got your glue, got your patches, but the first thing you want buried down in there is the sandpaper. Go back to that spot where it was. All you're going to do is you're going to give it a little sand, and that's just to roughen it up, and that's going to help the patch adhere. Now, depending on the patches you have, if you have the ones with the glue, you definitely want to do this, and then just kind of clean it off so that the glue is going to adhere better to the patch. If you have the other kind, they're known as scabs. You don't have to do any glue. You just peel off the back, put it right on, and it sticks. With the glue, you're just going to take the cap off. If it's a new one, you're going to have to puncture it with something, spread it around, let it set for a little bit. You're going to take your patch, peel off the back, put it on there. It's going to take about 5 minutes to set up. You want that glue to really set up so it's going to stick. If you try and put air in it too quick at this point, it's not going to stay. It's just going to come right off. And you're going to be fixing the flat again in a few minutes. Does that make sense for everybody so far? No questions there, Kat?
No questions yet. I would say fixing a flat is a lesson in patience, for sure.
Oh, it is. And one of the other pro tips, if there's somewhere that has shade, go move, get yourself over there, get in the shade, especially when it gets really hot. So we've done all that. We've got the patch. We've let it set up, or we're ready to put on our spare tube. Again, we just want to put some air in this to give it some shape. You can use your pump. You can just give it a blow like a balloon. If you've got a Presta, you want to close that valve to keep that air in there.
Can you show us how to open and close the Presta valve?
Okay.
Please.
Yep. Let me get right here in front. Okay, if you can see this, this is the valve right here. You just give it a little spin, and this is going to be, see how it's got a little gap there? And you can push it up and down. When you get it closed, it's going to be tight. You've got a little pin that sticks out below, and it doesn't move. So that's Presta. The type of valve that you have on your car, that's called a Schrader valve. And depending, if you don't have a pump, what you can do, just a second here, you can get what's called an adapter. And this little guy, you can get it at a bike shop. This is a Schrader adapter. So you put it on that Presta there. And so you can go to the gas station. If you don't have a pump, you can go to the gas station. You can use that pump at the gas station then to put air in. But you got to be careful with that, because those tend to put a lot more pressure. And I've done it before where I thought, okay, I'm going to be real careful. I put air in, got on the bike, boom, too much pressure, the tube blew. So I was worse off than I was before. So be careful when you do that. So We good with all that so far? All righty. I see head shaking, so. Okay.
Yes, we're good. For any new participants, if you have questions, you can write them in the chat or you can raise your hand.
So we're ready to put the tube back in. One of the things you'll see a lot of times is you think it's anal retentive, but some people will take the label on the tire and they will put it right over where the valve stem goes. And that's not to make it look pretty. That's to make it easier to find that hole. And so you don't have to go look at the wheel and see where that hole for the valve stem is. It's just right there. You want to tuck the tube into the wheel, into the tire, I mean. And I'm sorry if it's hard to see because I'm trying to watch you guys to make sure I'm on the camera at the same time as I'm actually doing this. Normally I'm just watching what I'm doing with the tire. And this is also why if you have a little air in there, gives it that shape, makes it easier to get the tube back in. So it's back in. And some people at this point will start using a tire iron to put the tire back around the bead on the wheel. You don't want to do that. You actually just want to use your thumb and just roll it over. Because what can happen, you can see that there, the tube is kind of cheated back out. If I was using the tire lever, that might pinch and tear the tube. So you're using your fingers to kind of put it back in, but also to feel and make sure you do that, because otherwise you're going to give yourself what's called a snake bite, and you're going to have to fix your tire tube again. It's all good. You want to check around. Mea culpa, I apologize for this one. I should have done this one earlier. Normally what you do when you have a puncture, after you pull out the tube, you check. You'll take a pair of gloves. If you've got riding gloves or something, feel around the inside of the tube, of the tire, to make sure there's nothing that's in there on the inside of the tire itself. Since I knew there wasn't a puncture, I kind of just went mental fart and just skip that step, but that's an important step because I've had to change 3 tubes in a row once for somebody because they didn't check that, they didn't check the rim, they didn't check the rim tape to make sure it was. You want to make sure where you're putting the tube is worked, and it kind of becomes obvious here at the end. You just want to make sure you work your way around, make sure the tube isn't sticking out anywhere so it hasn't cheated out on you. At this point, some people like, there's a little nut that comes with, if you have a Presta, and it kind of works nice just to make sure that valve stem doesn't move around on you, so that when you do put the pump on there, you're going to hold that tube right in place. Make sure your valve is open if you've got the Presta. And on a lot of these bike pumps, you will have a little lever there, and that's to lock it onto the valve stem. If you put it on there without that, it's not really going to hold. And at this point, you don't have to hold it. You can just start putting air in. So, is that got everybody kind of the basics of all this? Don't want to go too much longer because I know I already went over time, so we got to give Melissa time, and then you all for questions if you got them.
Mm-hmm. Looks good.
Everybody good?
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next part of our webinar, which is cleaning a chain. So you should all be able to see a slide that has different supplies on it. And I'm gonna let Melissa take over from here.
Sorry, I was trying to access that. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay, cool.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Had to kind of scoot over to get better internet access, but I think now we're good. So to start off, I just wanted to go over kind of the supplies that you need and how to prepare your work area. Right now I'm wearing an apron just to cover my clothing, but if you are gonna start cleaning the grease off of your chain, it's recommended that you wear, clothes if you get grease on them or something, it won't matter. You might also want to wear some gloves, so I'm going to put those on. It just makes cleanup a lot easier when you're washing your hands afterwards. You won't have all that dirt and grease on your hands. So if you're using a bike stand, you don't have to use a bike stand if you don't have one. It kind of makes things a lot easier. But you can always flip your bike upside down and work on the chain that way. When you first put the bike on the bike stand, you want to make sure that the chain is kind of level to the ground, and that's going to help your body mechanics when you put the chain scrubber on there. And I did include a photo of some of the supplies and the tools, and I also included a document that has the names of the tools. If you're going to be cleaning your bike often, you might want to consider, asking a friend to borrow these tools, or looking online for you to invest in these tools for you to have at home. But I can show you later, maybe like a close-up of some of these tools if you can't really see on the image that's provided. So after you put your bike on the bike stand, you want to go ahead and shift your gears to the lowest cog, both in the front and the back. And that just puts slack on the chain, and it kind of lets the chain move a little bit better as it's going through the scrubber. You can also use like an old toothbrush or any kind of brush that's going to kind of help loosen the grit up. You'll be using a bike-specific degreaser, and that's recommended because some of the harsher ones, they might do damage to the bike. So you want to look for something that is biodegradable or that's bike specific, because it's made to get that oil and the grit off of the bike chain. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the demonstration. If you can't hear me or you need to get closer or something like that, just tell me. And I'll try to face the camera as much as I can. So the first thing that you want to do actually is to check the chain with the chain tool. This particular chain tool is a part tool. I think it's like a CC 2.5 or something like that. But there's different ones like Pedro's or different brands that you can check the tension between the rings of the chain and make sure if it needs to be replaced or not. So that's one of the first things you want to check. Does it need to be replaced? And to do that, you just place the tool on top. I know it's hard to see, but then there's a little gauge on there that lets you measure, and it shows you the value of the space between the rings. So once you determine if you need to replace the chain or not, to clean it, you want to attach the chain scrubber onto the bottom. And it kind of clips on. It has two clips in the front and the back. And you want to make sure that the chain is seated inside of the brushes, so that it kind of like, it starts cleaning it there. This is the solution. The degreaser is a part tool CB2, and it's biodegradable. It's a citrus solvent, but there are other, there's other brands that are specific. Like this one's called Muck Off. But even if you just Google a bike chain cleaner, I think there's like Simple Green is also a good one. You take the degreaser and you pour it to the fill line. There's a little line on the scrubber that shows you the max to fill. And then you want to pedal backwards. at least 30 times, 30 revolutions around. And that gives the chain enough time to get clean with the degreaser. After that, you want to remove the chain scrubber. And you want to store the solvent in like a container. Once everything settles, once the contaminants settle, you can actually reuse the solution. So I recommend putting it in a container and labeling it so that you know what it is. Are we doing okay so far? So far, so good. So once you clean the chain, you want to go ahead and scrub off the chain scrubber. We'll just clean it off, rinse it off. And then you also want to spray off and scrub down some of the other components. So like the derailleur in the front and the back, between the cog and the cassette in the back, or the chain rings here in the front. So you just want to spray everything down. Now that you clean the chain, you can use the old toothbrush and you can go between the derailleur, try to get that grit free, loosen it up. And then with the rag, you just want to go in and kind of like clean everything off and dry everything off.
Hey, Melissa, can you show us the chain scrubber up close, perhaps?
Yeah. Yes, I can. So this is a Park Tools chain scrubber. It has a top and a bottom part. You can see the little brushes on there. So when you're installing it, you want to make sure that the chain sits inside of the brushes. It kind of sets in there. And then you just place one on top of the other, and it has these little clips that go on and like clip on like that. There you go. So front and back on there, and then you just paddle through the paddle. Okay. So once all the components are clean, you wipe it down. You can take a clean rag and then just hold it underneath the chain and then go through it. After you finish that step, then you want to fill this back up with soapy water. You can also use like a bigger brush and get it all lathered to get all of the extra dirt and the grime now that you've degreased. Get all the dirt off, get all the oil off, and then scrub it down. So I'll continue with that portion of it. I'm going to fill this up with soapy water to the fill line. And I'm going to repeat the process. Just place it back on to the bottom chain. And the reason you want to clean the bottom part of the chain is because you don't want all the grit and the grease to fall on the other components of the bike. So you're going to go through it again about 30 times until everything is nice. Feel the grease is off. I'm going to go ahead and put that brake on the rear wheel because I don't want to get hurt between the spokes. Okay, then you can dump that out. Now you want to dry everything off. You want to make sure that everything is nice and dry before you apply the oil. So I'm just running the rag. I'm holding it, over the chain while I'm running through the revolution. It's recommended that you allow the bike to air dry before you place the oil on, or if you have like a compressor blower, you can always just dry it with that, and that's a lot faster. Once that's all nice and clean, then you're going to take the lubricant. Here in our weather conditions, it's recommended that you have a dry lube, which helps to keep the dust and dirt off of your components. So you're going to take the lube and you want to put it on top of each of the rings between the chains. You want to take one drop. I'm going to go ahead and take this towel and place it underneath the chain. And I'm just going to place one drop on top of each ring. And then go through the revolution, pedaling through to even out the lube across the whole chain. Until you get the entire chain lubed, and then with a clean towel, you want to just gradually hold it, and then just go through the pedal, pedaling through so that it's kind of evenly distributed. All right, and that is a clean chain. So it's recommended that you clean your chain once a month, especially if you're riding frequently. Or it's also recommended like after you ride in wet or dirty weather conditions. If you're riding off-road, then you may need to clean your chain more often just to make sure that things are running smoothly. But that's about it. Do you have any questions? Anybody have anything to add or any comments?
Thank you, Melissa. That was great. Feel free to type any comments or questions in our group chat, or at this point, you can raise your hand or you're free to speak. I'm wondering, how do you find, oh, go ahead, Bro. Go ahead.
Oh, I am curious. Wait, I can't see myself. I have this tube, and I was riding yesterday, and I just lost air, and I was like, oh, I have a flat, and then I was like, I'll worry about it later. I carry a spare tube, and then so then I replaced tubes, got home, and then right now I figured it'd be perfect to like check it out, and I put some air in it, and it's got like 6 holes. It's got a bunch of holes. So I had sealant in it, and then so I put more sealant right now. Is it done? Should I just, is it too late for this tube? Is it trash now? At how many holes is it trash? That's it. That's my question.
Go through a tube can take a lot of punishment. And so if it's got 6 holes, you had sealant in there. The one drawback about sealant is it dries out. And if you don't replace it, if you don't keep it fresh, at a certain point, it's not going to work for you anymore. So you've got to check that on a regular basis. You can't just put it in and a year later think it's still good, because it won't last that long. So you got to refresh it every so often. The other thing is you need to have air pressure in the tube for the sealant to work. If right now it's not coming out because of those holes, or it shouldn't be because there's really no air in it. You put some air in it, it'll start seeping out of those holes. And that's when you know it's going to work and it's going to plug it up. So unless you got a really big hole, if you got that sealant in there, it should be fine. But also go through, check the inside of that tire and make sure there's nothing in there, the tips of the thorns or anything that are going to cause another puncture. So in that way it'll work. If you really want to get crazy, you can have what, and I've seen people do this, they call it a patch party. They will take all their old tubes, they will get out their patch kit, and they will sit there on they'll pick some morning and they'll just put tubes and they'll put patches on everything. So in addition to the sealant, they've got a patch, and those things become almost bulletproof until you hit something big. But the sealant, you really need to make sure it's still in liquid form and you've got enough air pressure in there for it to really work. And that's the same, and the same holds true if you're running a tubeless system. If the sealant isn't still liquid, and if you don't have enough air pressure in there, it's not going to do its job.
Okay. Thank you.
But give that tube a try. It should be fine now.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you.
All righty.
I've seen people make jewelry out of the old tubes, or use it as a liner or make like even bags and stuff like that out of recycled material, the tubes. But I was going to ask you, Scott, can you explain what a tubeless system is? And that option works for a lot of people. And I'm not 100% sure if road bikes can also be tubeless, because I know a lot of mountain bikers that go tubeless.
Yeah, the tubeless system is basically what you already have without the tube. And for the valve stem, there's a special valve stem that you have to put in, and you've got to get a wheel that is tubeless ready. And so that means, just a second. So on the tubeless ready wheels, there's going to be a little bead just on the inside of the rim here, and that's what the tire is actually going to catch on. Right now, what's holding the tire in place is the pressure of the tube that's in there. So you take that tube out, and you've just got that much more space in there. And so you need to have a wheel that's actually set up as tubeless ready. The system will look just like this. You'll have a special valve stem that you need to install. It goes in, and it's going to lock from both sides, so it's going to keep the seal. And you also have to have special rim tape lining it so it keeps the seal, because otherwise you're going to lose air out of the nipples here from all the different spokes.
Hey,
So
Scott,
to look,
can you adjust your camera so we can see your wheel?
I'm sorry. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, let me do that again. So right here on the rim, on the inside, there's going to be a bead that's going to hold the edge of your tire, and that's going to hold in place. So instead of the tube holding it in place by expanding outward, what it does is once you get that pressure in there, it's going to hold it in place. Let me click here. And if we look real carefully in there, you'll see that there's it's got a little rim around there. I don't know if you can really see it here in the light, but if you look at your wheel, most of them are just going to have, the edge is going to be rolled over. And so that as you're looking at it, that's what's going to catch the bead on the tire. But on these, it's going to be a more pronounced bead that's actually going to lock it in there, so that when that edge of the tire comes in, it's going to hold it in there. Down the center of the wheel, you're going to have rim tape that's actually going to form a seal. And then you have the valve stem. Instead of the one that comes on the tube, you're going to have a valve stem, that insert that you actually have to put in here separate. So those are all the little things. But what the tubeless system allows you to do is it allows you to actually run your tire at a lower rolling pressure, which is great for mountain bikes. But a lot of road bikes and gravel riders are starting to do that, because one, it does let you go to a little lower pressure. So instead of having a high pressure, which is real hard and you feel every bump, they can set that pressure a little lower, and then it kind of works as a suspension, where that tire is taking out a lot of that road vibration that you're feeling, makes your ride a little smoother. Is it something you want to jump to just because? I'm not so sure, because you have to have a tubeless ready wheel. You got to have a tire that's set up for that. You've got to have you've got to put the rim tape. You've got to have the you got to have all these little features in there. Plus, then you've got to have a big volume of air initially to get that tire to seat. So for some people, they either go out and get a compressor, or they get a special bike pump where they can pump in a lot of pressure, release it quickly, and that forces the tire to seal. So for most of us, until you're ready for that, it's better just to learn how to fix the flat and understand that sometimes, yeah, you got to replace the sealant just like you did, Roll. So good job on that, though.
Cool, thank you, Scott. I have one more thing to add in terms of how many patches can you put on a tube before it's like worthless. I mean, I usually do like no more than 3 before I just replace it. But you can also cut up old tubes and put them as like sort of an extra liner layer between your tube and the wheel. Sorry, your tube and the tire. So you can recycle old tubes, you don't have to throw them out, you can reuse them. And especially around here where there's tons of pointy things like puncture vine, that extra layer of a cut up tube could actually really help with getting a lot of flats. So just my 2 cents. Does anybody else have any questions about any part of our presentation?
What was the name of the tool, Scott, that you used at the beginning of your tire change? I think it had like multifunction. You could also maybe loosen the wheel off of if it's not a quick release cut one. Just the name of the tool.
It's called a fixie tool. You can get it at a bike shop. And it's really meant for fixie bikes because it's got some things specific to fixing the hub. But you've got each of these little notches in here is different size nut. This one right here is for the one for your axle, is the standard size. And it's just a great little extra tool. If you don't want to, you can get a 99-cent crescent wrench. It'll do basically the same thing, but I found this is just a nice little tool, and it's got some extra little features on there that come in handy every so often. It's a specialty item. You got to look for it. It's not going to be at most shops. About 15 bucks for something like this. And it's just called a fixie tool.
Great, thank you, Scott. Let's see. A lot of people here might already be experienced riders who look over their bikes for those things, but this is just a good way to do a little more at-home maintenance in between, you know, bike shop tune-ups and that sort of thing. I clean my chain every month if I can do it, but it definitely depends on how much you ride, if it's raining or dirty or whatever like that. So just some good tips. I was curious, Melissa, how you figure out what the right type of lube is and the right type of cleaner. I know you gave us some suggestions in those documents, but how do you figure out what kind of lube to use for where you live?
So basically they have what's listed as dry and wet lubes. Here I only know about dry lubes because we live in the desert. But I'd say if if it was a rainy season, or if you live in an area that is, moist all the time, it's raining all the time, then you may use a wet condition type of lube. Yeah, that's about it. That was the only thing that I had to add on the lube. And then the other question, was it for the degreaser? Degreaser. So choosing a degreaser. Yeah, it's recommended that you use a bike specific one. Like I had mentioned before, there's different mechanic type of degreasers and industrial level degreasers. But the reason that it's recommended that you use a bike specific one is just so that it doesn't wear and tear on the components of your bike. Some need to be, they're concentrated, so you'd have to add water to them. So it kind of makes it nice to just go with the bike specific ones if you're starting off for the first time and you're trying to fill things out. Just get one of those. I did in the document list a few brands, but even if you just Google, a bike specific degreaser, it'll guide you to different brands and you can price compare and stuff like that. If you don't have a degreaser, maybe you just want to start with soapy water. That's better than just, the grease accumulating on your chain. So even just a regular dishwashing soap with water would get some of that that grease off too.
Cool. Follow-up question. Can you use WD-40 on your bike?
I don't know the horror stories about that, but I know that it can damage a lot of the bike components if people use it. I know it's a quick fix. It's going to get things rolling really smoothly, but in the long run, it's known to damage the bike components on there. So it's not a solvent that you'd want to use on your bike.
And WD-40 is a solvent. It is not a lube, and a lot of people use it as a lube because they think it's going to lubricate, so they just spray it on and then they're done. And it's one of those things where if you do that, you actually are not lubricating your chain. You're not lubricating the system. You're actually just creating some problems for down the road. And it's also important, as Melissa was talking about, some bike specific stuff. Also, there's different types of lubes out there. One here, this is assembly lube. That's not the kind of lube you want to use on a bike chain, because it's what you actually want to use if you're putting parts together. This is going the nuts way inside. If you put this on there, all you're going to do is get gunk, because it's a heavy duty lube. It's just going to act like a dirt magnet, and your chain is going to get black in about 5 seconds after you're out on the road, because it just does it. So you want to get something, make sure when you look at it, it's meant for bikes. And you can also get some cheap stuff. It's called wax lube. It works. You can get this at a sporting goods shop. It's not what you really want to use for around here. You want to go to the bike shop and get something that's specific, or order it online. Get something that's really specific for the bikes and the conditions. And around here, it's going to be a dry lube. If you're going to go to the mountains, you're going to be riding in mud. That's when you think about something like a wet lube or something. But you do that to the conditions of where you're riding.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
I was just going to ask, I mean, I don't have a bike stand. Is it okay for us to flip over the bike? Is there pros and cons to it? Is it the same thing as a stand? Because I've actually done a tune-up with flipping my bike over. Do you recommend anything else aside from?
No, I think it's totally doable. And as you put your workstation together, you kind of find what's comfortable for your body mechanics. You want to consider that as well. Probably one of the biggest benefits for having a bike stand is that you don't always have to stoop over to check on the bike components, and then you can adjust the height. You can also it's a lot easier to access the shifters and the brakes when you do have a bike stand, but you can always work around it. There's no, if you can do it when the bike's flipped upside down, that's wonderful, that's perfect. It's just something in the long run, the more you ride, the more that you start to work on your bike and do more kinds of repairs on there. Maybe at that time, you might consider borrowing a bike stand or investing in one for your house. But basically, it's body mechanics and access to the other components of the bike.
Thank you.
And you might actually have a bike rack that you didn't even know on the back of your car. If you've got a bike rack that you put on the back of your car, you can use that to do a lot of that work too. It gets it up off there. You may not be able to spin the pedals quite as freely depending on its placement, but you can use that just as easily as you can one of these work racks.
Wow,
It's something that until you think, okay, I just put it on there to drive my bike places. It's also a functional tool if you want to use it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, I don't have a bike stand. I work on everything with my bike upside down. I know that for some bikes that have hydraulic brakes, it's not recommended to leave your bike upside down for very long because the brake fluid is flowing in the wrong direction. But I think it's totally doable as long as, you're not crouching. I mean, I just sit on the floor with my bike upside down. But adjusting brakes and stuff like that is much easier when the bike is upright. So if you can borrow a stand for that type of thing, it's a lot easier. But you can fix the flat and clean your chain perfectly well with your bike upside down. So it's doable. Okay, cool. So we have about 4 minutes left. I guess we'll just be wrapping some stuff up unless anybody has any final thoughts or questions. And you can always message us in any capacity with any needs for advice with fixing your bike. I wish we did like emergency roadside assistance, but depending on where you are, we could probably help you with that too. So yeah, any final thoughts, Scott or Melissa?
I just wanted to remind everybody that this Friday is Bike to Work Day. So if you are able to go to work at this time, I highly encourage you to commute there by bike and encourage others to do so as well. And also remembering those of us who are having to work at this time. It is a fragile time. And so it's also a day of celebration for those who are essential workers going into work, whether they're getting there on the bus or driving there. It's just a day to remember everybody who's putting their life on the line to go into work at these times.
And Melissa's lucky because she gets to go to work. Some of us have what are called non-essential jobs, and we're stuck at home. So I'll be out riding just because, but thinking of everybody who's an essential worker. And but I'm also going to be, I think there's an MPO this meeting this MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. They're the folks who do all the funding for most of the transportation project. I believe they've got a meeting this Friday, so I'll be reminding them that it's Bike Month and that we need to make sure that there's lots of safe infrastructure for us all. And while we're on safe infrastructure and just safety, next Wednesday is the Ride of Silence. And again, that's going to be a social distancing ride. We can't ride as a group. We're going to be posting some stuff here within the next, hopefully later this evening on that. But it's an opportunity to get out there, just as this Friday is an opportunity to remember and honor those people who are essential workers. Next Wednesday is an opportunity to remember those people, all our friends who ride bikes who were taken from us too soon.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you both for your contributions. I think it was a really great session, and we'll have the recording up if you want to share it with friends that couldn't be here today. I'm not sure what our webinar plans are for next week, but we will let you know. And I just want to thank everybody who tuned in today. It was really fun to see your faces, and I hope that we all got a little learning done today. I know that I did. So cool. Thanks, everybody. Take care, ride safe. Bye-bye.